Welcome, everybody, to the Eat, Pray, Faith podcast with Dr. Tracy. That's me. And today I have my very special guest, Natasha Trenev, who is known as the Mother of Probiotics. We've had her on a webinar before, but we've never done a live podcast. So you are in for an absolute treat. She is a brilliant woman. And I have learned more from her about probiotics in the short time that I've spent with her than I've learned in my entire career. And even so much so that I've been corrected on things. And I really feel the industry needs to be corrected. So today we're actually going to be talking about bacteria and biofilms, which I think is a really interesting topic and a hot trending topic right now, biofilms and antibiotic resistant bacteria. But Natasha, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank
And
you.
wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of a background on who you
Sure.
are and how you got here.
Yeah, actually, I've been in this industry for more than 56 years. I started in my family's business. We brought over the concept of natural Bulgarian-style yogurt, which we sold to America in the mid-1960s. I was still a student at UCLA. And I was the first one to set the yogurt standard in the state of California in 1969. And we also introduced the first kefir product to Altadena Dairy in the early 1970s, and finally was called by the state of New York to come and testify so that they could set a correct labeling standard for kefir. Now, so the reason I'm telling you this, that I understand the fermentation of these microorganisms, whether they're starter cultures or whether we call them a probiotic organism, and there's a huge difference. You cannot put all probiotic organisms in a functional food such as a yogurt or a kefir. And if you use the wrong starter culture, it means your product will not be really that what you're calling it. In other words, the starter culture is what defines the finished product. So we have a big problem in our country because nobody's following standards. Nobody understands the difference between functional foods and probiotics. And actually, I was the first one to really freeze dry a selected super strain of L. acidophilus while I was still a exclusive licensee of the University of Nebraska, and give it in a concentrated pure form as a powder. Before then, the only thing we had was a liquid acidophilus, which my family introduced. And the fact is that we were seeing many more compromised people, even in the 70s. When it started with the 80s, we started seeing the graph go up. And of course, we are here today with 80% of our people chronically ill and about 60% of our children. So this area of probiotics, which I introduced in 1982 with my first probiotic called Superdophilus, which was a super strain of L. acidophilus. And I really opened up the whole field, and I understand what's going on now. The problem is that this processing is so complex, so particular, that nobody can copy us except if they go to a contract manufacturer, just buy cell concentrates, throw them together, give everybody a bunch of science. And that doesn't help us because we are really in very serious water here. We don't understand microbes. We don't understand how they've been affected by those 1,000 chemicals that are in our food, mostly sugars. And right now, we have also a problem with the growing number of biofilms. Now, if you understand that bacteria's primal objective is to multiply its own kind, it's not the simplest form of life, but it is a very simple form of life. If you remember your early biology, it's called a prokaryote, which means the simplest form of a cell wall and very loose nucleus and other parts inside. And the reason the bacteria are simple is because they need to adopt. They need to adopt, and they need to be able to form more intelligent colonies in order to dominate an area. Because remember, their primary objective is to multiply their own kind, and that's all they're interested in. So we have to choose the bacteria for our health that are suited to grow inside of us and have their best interest to keep us healthy, because we are the best area for them to thrive. I hope that makes sense.
It does. And you said a lot of like, whoa, aha moments for me right in the first 3.5 minutes that we've been on here. So I'm
Mhm.
going to back up a little bit. So you not only own product companies, but you, back when you came here in 1962, started the entire industry on food-based fermentation, basically. Am I correct in
Yeah,
saying?
my family it was about 1964. My family started a business called Continental Culture Specialists,
Mhm.
and we introduced royal yogurt, liquid acidophilus that was distributed to the health food stores. But by the way, were just pill stores. They had no food. I was the
Right.
one that brought in refrigeration for them to bring in food first. And then 25 years later, I finally talked the industry into putting refrigeration into supplements sections because there's many supplements that do need thermal control. Otherwise, they destabilize not just probiotics. I'm talking about oils, some
Mhm.
amino acids. So I've had a very close knit tie with the industry. I sat on standards committees for 10 years, helped to write standards for many product lines. And my labeling standard for probiotics was actually read into congressional record in 1994. And the industry asked me to do that. It wasn't really my idea. I had a lot of other things to keep me busy, but I donated my time and my life. I never got paid for that to help the industry organize groups to show to Congress that we were serious about self regulating. And
Yeah.
so we have to understand number one, basics. What are the functional foods, such as yogurt and kefir? Which functional foods we should not be eating on a daily basis? Number three, what are the probiotic organisms that evolved with Homo sapiens and are friendly to us and beneficial at all levels under all conditions?
Okay, so stop there because that's a lot. So
Yeah.
what you said about the starters in the 1970s with your starter culture. So
Mhm.
basically, all of the probiotic based foods on the market today in the refrigerated section of the grocery store in plastic containers are just creamy junk food. Is that what I'm hearing?
Some of them are, yeah, some of them are because first of all, if you have a good starter culture, it makes the food much more digestible and absorbable. That's
Mhm.
what the function of a fermented food. And it produces a good amount of lactic acid and other compounds that help your body stay healthy. Now, that was great before we had this assault of, 1,000 chemical agents in our food, dozens of resistant bacteria to antibiotics. We've changed the ecology. That's why we have to change the understanding and the use of these products.
Right.
That's the
So
difference.
we're getting into bacteria and biofilms. I want to start at bacteria level because I
Yeah.
think there's confusion in the industry, which you've kind of taught me is not really the truth of this good and bad terminology with bacteria. And what I learned from you through our
Mhm.
webinar series, which is still available at the Academy if anybody wants it, it was incredible. 4 classes with
Mhm.
Natasha, unbelievable material. But what I learned was bacteria is not good or bad, it's opportunistic. So can you
Yes.
expand on that, please?
Yeah, it's opportunistic because its primal directive is to multiply its own kind. So if it evolved with Homo sapiens, that's one of the bacteria I chose was Lactobacillus acidophilus because it's been in the literature for well over 100 years. It's been used by multiple cultures safely, and it's only helped us, digest our foods, absorb our foods, maintain a healthy pH in our intestinal tract, and has never, ever, under any conditions, caused any harm to a human being, at least in any published research that I've seen. So
Right.
it's very important to understand that you have to use bacteria that are safe at any level, and then that they don't compete with other essential probiotic bacteria. Like L. acidophilus does not compete with my bifidobacteria that loves to live in the large intestine. So again, if you understand the primal directive of bacteria, an acidophilus is a facultative anaerobe, means that they can live in the presence of oxygen or live without the presence of oxygen. So their habitat is usually the small intestine because the upper part of the small intestine has more oxygen. And as you go down towards the ileum, the oxygen level depletes. And then when you get into the large intestine, which the colon is part of the large intestine, you have an oxygen-free environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where your bifidobacteria thrive, which we call obligate anaerobes, which means that they only like to grow in an environment that lacks oxygen. And that's what most people don't understand.
Well, yeah. I mean, practitioners don't understand it. I'm learning this right now in present time, in real time, I'm learning this. So just for our listeners, just to go a little bit back, we are talking about bacteria, and just so people understand, probiotics, that is the common terminology, it's out there,
Right.
are bacteria. They are known as good bacteria, and then you have things that are known as bad bacteria. But what we learned in that webinar, if people are interested, is that even your good probiotic bacteria can be opportunistic, and when out of balance can also be a problem. And so the industry is pushing probiotics. So is it possible that we have the wrong strains and amounts? Is it possible that we even are taking bacteria that should not be being ingested by humans? So can you kind of unpack that whole thing?
Yeah, sure. Let's go. Let's start first with yeast. Yeast is a more complex organism. It's called a eukaryote, and it's more the structure of like a human mammalian cell. It has, more classical structure with the nucleus in place and all the other parts inside of its cell wall in a very particular space. So it's considered a more evolved organism than a bacteria. Now, yeast is a problem because you never want to supplement the yeast, because if yeast are allowed to overgrow, they're pleomorphic, meaning they change shapes. And when they change shapes, when they're allowed to overgrow is when they become aggressive and they change a shape into a mold. And that mold grows projectiles that they can literally attach themselves to the intestinal wall and, now start not only pumping toxins into your bloodstream, but competing with the body for nutrients. Okay.
So they can change into a mold?
Yes. Yes.
So I'm not even going to get into the exasperated levels of mold that we're seeing everywhere, and including in people. So, okay, I'm a little mind blown. So in the industry, yeast-based probiotics would be what specifically?
I wouldn't take them because let's go back. Each one of these topics requires so much education. I think we need to do seminars. But basically, the yeast was used by a French pharmaceutical company to compete with a bad organism called Clostridium difficile, or some people call it short C. difficile or C. diff. It's one of those primary organisms that is adopted to all kinds of antibiotics, has become resistant, and is very deadly for elderly patients, especially in hospital settings, because it can literally chew up your intestinal wall, cause bloody diarrhea, sepsis, and a host of very unpleasant problems. So this French company said, okay, we're going to give you this yeast. We're going to call it Saccharomyces boulardii, but it happens to be a very close cousin to a yeast called Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is a brewer's yeast used to brew beer. And yeah, yeast is a very good competitor. So they said, we're going to give this yeast in a hospital setting using a pharma model that you give them a substance that is going to treat a symptom without realizing what the further consequences could be. Does that make sense? So you're using a yeast to compete with the bad bacteria, but my question has been, what happens when it outcompetes the C. difficile and is inside your GI tract, and by chance, your immune system is not up to par and it's allowed to overgrow? It can't stimulate mold growth in your 27 feet of GI tract. And unfortunately, till today, nobody has given me an honest answer. And that's what I say. You cannot play with bacteria or yeast because it's like a 3-year-old playing with a nitroglycerin set.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, you don't know the consequences. So then what happened, because most people want simple, easy marketing, and real lactobacilli require thermally controlled conditions in order for them to live in a real arrested state of growth that doesn't overgrow inside of a capsule or a bottle and becomes useless by the time you consume it. So what they figured, okay, we're going to get these soil organisms that are used in India, but they're not used in India on a regular basis. They're used, sometimes in Ayurvedic medicine to treat conditions. So again, what happens to the United States? These soil bacteria get transferred here. And the reason they are used, because again, they can change shapes. They're pleomorphic. In their spore form, they can survive up to 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, okay, because they are soil organisms that are made to live in the soil. However, when they change into a regular microbe, they can and will produce toxins to dominate their territory. And these toxins can become harmful to the human being. The toxins are okay while they're fighting for other unfriendlies in your gut. But once they get rid of that competition, that toxin production doesn't necessarily stop. And they're going to start producing more toxins to dominate their territory, which is not a thing that you want to happen to your patient. Okay. So again, that's a very short explanation.
Yeah. But I mean, soil-based probiotics, spore-forming probiotics, they're all the rave right now.
I
It's
know. Why?
yeah.
Because they give simple results. They're, again, our industry is adopting the pharma model. Treat the
Mhm.
symptom.
Right.
Get rid of the symptom, but don't worry about what happens to the ecosystem. And I think it should be otherwise. I think we have to be very careful what we put into that ecosystem, which is 100 trillion strong just in your intestinal tract. Not talking about other parts of your body, which we can really get into a seminar. The 100 trillion organisms in your GI tract is what we're talking about, and where these soil bacteria can attach themselves to particular parts in your intestinal tract, and you may not even know that this toxin is being produced until way down the line when the patient starts showing some symptoms. And I would venture to say possibly 99% of the practitioners will not know where the cause is,
Right.
because they don't understand bacteria and how long they can take to dominate an area to cause a problem. So it's not something we should be playing around with, especially when we have such compromised patients.
So with all of your decades of experience, which by the way,
Mhm.
you look fabulous. You don't look like you have decades of experience, but I believe you. Um, you said there's only specific bacteria that have kind of evolved with the human species, and those are the
Right.
ones that you choose to use. Is that correct?
That's right. I could use a host of them, but if they haven't evolved with us and they're not friendly to each other, I don't use them. And some of them are
So,
very difficult to grow, to stabilize, to keep dormant, not actually dormant, arrested growth. They're only dormant at minus 170 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, liquid nitrogen, which is like the
right.
sperm bank. Anything above that is arrested growth. So,
So now we know. Um, so what are the core four that you choose?
okay. So I chose Lactobacillus acidophilus because my family did introduce Lactobacillus acidophilus to the health food industry in the mid 1960s.
Mhm.
There may have been other forms of liquid acidophilus, but they really didn't contain much. And then, I studied the acidophilus and found that they were in Soviet literature, they were in French literature, they were in literature around the world. And I said, aha, this one has got to be one that, very friendly to us and have decades of use with nobody ever being harmed. So then in the early 1980s, I collaborated with the foremost authority on bifidobacteria, Dr. Jeremiah Rasic, from the former Yugoslavia, who wrote what I call the Bifidobacteria Bible, with a Swiss doctor, Dr. Kerman. And I learned that Bifidobacteria was guarded by the Germans and the Japanese as the most important bacteria to human health because they were the primary residents of the large intestine. Now, most of the species that I've studied in bifidobacteria are very friendly, and I've never found one bifidobacteria except a couple that are questionable that I wouldn't use. But I was very particular. I went to the German banks, and the German banks at that time were the only ones that did the DNA homology. I was very careful what species, what strain I use of bifidobacteria. And for almost 15 years, people didn't know what the heck I was talking about. Bifido what? Bifidobacteria. And unfortunately or fortunately, now they know. So you have to choose the bacteria. And also, I found that the Lactobacillus acidophilus and the Bifidobacteria bifidum that I use are very compatible. They don't antagonize or inhibit each other, which is very important because even though you have 27 feet of GI tract, they will cross paths, and you want them to be friendly under all conditions. You don't want your friendlies ever inhibiting each other. Does that make sense?
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
so then, coming from a culture of yogurt, my family was in yogurt making and cheese making for 750 years out of Northern Macedonia, which was part of the former Yugoslavia. And, my grandfather was the largest exporter of cheese and yogurt out of Macedonia into Western and parts of Eastern Europe before World War II, between World War I and World War II. I never met my grandfather because he died when my father was 9. So, and we had the family history. Unfortunately, that part of the world, that's another 3 chapters in a book I intend to write about how people lost family members and their whole legacy. But luckily, my father preserved that, and he became the official court supplier to the King of Yugoslavia, making our family's excellent yogurt. And so that's how I got involved. When I finished UCLA, I decided I did not want to get into politics because a horrific thing happened when Bobby Kennedy Jr. got shot, and I, by God's intervention, didn't make it to that. My mother sat me down. She said, "Have you lost your mind? Your whole family's been displaced. We've lost everything because of politics." And that's when I sat down. I said, "Well, my father's doing good things. He's helping people with these products. I wonder if I did some more investigation, if I could make these products really into a natural therapy that can benefit a host of people." And that's what started my whole foray into this field by being fortunate enough to exchange scientific literature with the former head of the Academy of Sciences. At that time, it was called Leningrad. It's now back to being called St. Petersburg. And I exchanged, they wanted novels. They wanted novels like by Robert Heinlein and other writers like that. And so for that, I got the first microfiche. I didn't even know what a microfiche was in the 1970s, of all these phenomenal articles written in Russian scientific literature about the amazing properties of Lactobacillus acidophilus and how it's helped so many people in many settings over there. So there was a rich history there. And then I got some books from Bulgaria, from the former Yugoslavia, and translated them. And I said, "Oh my God, this is significant. These bacteria really are part of us, and they can dramatically improve our health." Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love how you took, observation of your family heritage and made
Mhm.
it therapeutic from it.
Yeah.
So Lactobacillus I can't talk today.
Acidophilus, just think of it as what it stands for. Acid means acid, and ophilis coming from the Greek phile, meaning friendly, friendly acid. And lactobacillus means milk bacteria. So that's how scientists make these names, which are tongue twisters. So it's lactobacillus
Yeah.
acidophilus,
Like,
meaning,
what is the name we should give this that no one will ever know or pronounce but us? So go to
so
that part about lacto, because I know this was a big part that kind of blew my mind that I was, I mean, it's called lacto, I should know, but I didn't even draw the parallel of its connection to being fed by milk. So
Mhm.
please
And that's what I said. These bacteria love milk. Why? Because it provides the best food. I told you they're not stupid. They don't waste their cellular energy to impress
the
us.
whole world's dairy free. I mean, we get milk from nuts now, not from cows. Let's
I
talk about
know.
it.
Okay, well, let me just finish one last thing. So the last bacteria I chose as part of my Trenev trio, which is my professional ProTren line, was the Lactobacillus bulgaricus, which is one of the bacterium that makes the yogurt starter. So yogurt starter is a Lactobacillus bulgaricus and a Streptococcus thermophilus. And at the turn of the century, a very famous Russian physician who was a partner of Louis Pasteur at the Pasteur Institute in France studied the long-lived Bulgarians and said that he isolated the first Lactobacillus bulgaricus and called it the longevity bacteria. And his book was the first one, it was called The Prolongation of Life, published before the 1930s, and talked about the elimination of toxins from the body as being crucial point to longevity. And he said the reason the Bulgarians lived so long is they lived outdoors, they lived in a healthy environment. They had a daily intake, at least twice a day, of Bulgarian style yogurt. They had their bread and they had a very simple diet with natural fruits and vegetables. And most of the meat that they would eat is lamb. And by the way, sheep are one of the very few animals that don't form cancer in their bodies, which is another topic for investigation. So that's why I said, well, if, Mechnikov studied this Bulgaricus, it has phenomenal properties, I'm going to include it because it's one of the few bacteria that it can actually help pre-digest proteins and carbs. And it does it for itself. So the human host benefits because it's breaking it down for its own use. And then that's how the human host benefits. It also has incredible ability to activate the immune system, especially killer cell activity. And that was some Japanese work that was done a couple of decades ago. So these three bacteria, I said, are essential. They don't inhibit each other. They only help the human host. And you have to be careful because these bacteria, under their direction, will stimulate the growth of other bacteria, which they feel would help the human host to stay alive and be healthy because, again, that's their environment they choose to thrive in. So it's a sort of a very selfish objective, but it happens to help us. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So was there a fourth one?
Yeah, the fourth one I introduced was again the study with Dr. Rosic, Bifidobacteria infantis. And what horrified me, it was in the 1970s in a European journal that they said that this Bifidobacteria infantis was disappearing from healthy mothers who were supposed to pass on this bacteria to their infants through a vaginal birth. And then a component of breast milk was specifically designed to stimulate the growth of this particular bacteria. And I said, how is it that we've completely screwed up our natural, protection to the point where a couple of decades ago, and I can't get new data, but only 7% of the women in North America were able to pass on this bacteria to their infants, even if they were born vaginally and breastfed. And that shocked me.
Wow.
Because this is one of the few bacteria that needs to be like 99% of the microbes found in a breastfed infant. And the reason this bacteria is so important, it's one of the few that can help upregulate and downregulate the immune system when necessary. And the downregulation is very significant because it allows the immune system to tolerate food particles as they cross the intestinal wall. This is what people don't understand. And without this bacterium, there's none other. Maybe some bacteria can reduce gas, but they cannot do this function where they have this intimate relationship with the immune system to allow the immune system to pass certain food articles. And I strongly believe that that's why we have an explosion of food intolerance with children, food allergies, because that, tolerance was not built in when they were an infant. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That was a super shocking statistic when you said that to the class when we did the
Mhm.
webinars. You think you're doing the right things, you try to do the vaginal birth, and only 7%. And so for the moms listening, anyone who's pregnant, and I actually, one of my coworkers is expecting in November and she's having a little girl.
Mhm.
And it was one of the things that she was asking me. She's like, what would you recommend? I was like, I would take this bifidobacteria infatis, I was like, because you want to be prepared, you want your baby to be prepared. And,
Yeah.
it comes as the life start. So she's all in. She's like, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think the more we talk about it, because this isn't talked about, like prenatal health in general is not talked about from a nutritional standpoint. They only worry when you get preeclamptic or your blood
Hmm.
pressure's high. Looking down there doesn't tell us anything about the health of the mother,
Right.
and what her nutrient levels are, what her vitamin D, C, probiotics, all of the things. And so if there's anything, I mean, they do a prenatal, but that's not enough. It's not enough when a baby's immune system is 100% dependent upon the microbiome that it first receives, and then it can repopulate on its own. I mean, it's just, I hope people really understand listening to this, that if you want to get somebody a baby gift, get them a bottle of the Bifidobacteria impetus and take it to the baby shower in a little
Yeah.
cooler, because we got to keep it cold.
Right. No, no, it's important because thank you for that, because you know what it is that um, what we also found that children who were autistic had a history of intestinal problems on both the mother's and father's side. It's not the only cause of the autism, but it is one of the major causes of the autism.
Yeah.
So when both the father, because the intimacy between the father and the mother, they exchange bacteria like crazy. So that exchange of bacteria leads either to a healthy or an unhealthy microbiome. And I'll keep it simple. So the infantis is one of the most important things. So what I tell people, the father and the mother should take the Trenev trio, and the mother should take the Life Start product at least 3 months before she gives birth. And then she needs to give it to the infant on a small amount, like, express some breast milk or in a little dropper, a little just on the mouth, or put it on the nipple when the baby's suckling. Small amount, a couple of times a day is what will get it implanted. And that will make a host of difference, because not only will the baby thrive, it will grow. Its neurons will be developed properly. Its mental process will be developed properly. It'll have all those tools. So that's what's so important for people to understand, which they don't understand, because there's a lot of companies now promoting product as necessary for the infant. And I'm sorry, the literature just doesn't support it. Uh, you have to have the right bacteria, because we just don't know enough. And since we're not producing healthy children, we got to stick to that which we know.
Yeah, and I love that. You're not only saying the literature doesn't support it, that it works, but you're also saying if it's not in the literature, we just don't know, and bacteria aren't something to play with. I mean, I think
No.
people just think probiotics are so friendly and they would never do anything to hurt us. But
No.
honestly, if they are out of balance, it is an immune system disruption,
Of course.
regardless.
Because
We
remember, each immune cell has to deal with about 200,000 microbes. So the immune system cells need the friendlies to help them deal with so many microbes that they have to deal with on a nanosecond level, literally.
wow.
So it's not a game you want to lose. And so since we're also talking about biofilms, so why do bacteria and yeast uh, form biofilms? Biofilms are formed as a way of dominating a territory or protecting the microorganism from attack. So uh, the microorganisms will actually signal each other by photon light emission or chemical processes, and they'll start covering themselves in glucose. It's really ingenious how intelligent these creatures are. And they cover themselves in glucose because the immune cells do not perceive a sugar as a danger, because only things made from protein do the immune cells perceive as a danger, because bacteria are protein, and food particles are protein. So a sugar is not something the immune system considers a danger, so it will ignore it. And so these critters are so smart, they will actually form this huge colony of microorganisms. And there's something that we call quorum sensing, which they will notify each other. We got enough members. Let's close this off. And they close it off. And actually, this new entity starts operating on a much more sophisticated, higher level, like a higher thinking entity.
That's amazing.
It's sort of scary.
Yeah,
It's
and so biofilms are associated with a lot of the antibiotic resistant bacterias.
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. Yes. Antibiotic resistance happens two ways.
Mhm.
It's something called plasmid transfer, and I talked about this, and I'll make it easy to understand. Microorganisms can exchange chips. They're called plasmids, and they can literally line up next to each other, even if they're not that friendly with each other. But for the preservation of the whole kind, they will transfer these plasmids and teach the other organism how to evade antibiotics. And to give you an example of what happened earlier, biofilms is only one evasion, but some organisms don't even have to form biofilms to evade antibiotics. And I'll give you a perfect example what happened with the E. coli. Before the 1980s, all E. coli were benign. And what happened because of the antibiotic war, a Shigella organism shared the plasmid with an E. coli, and that particular group of E. coli learned how to make the Shiga toxin, but in much greater volume than the original Shigella. And so then you have your OH157 E. coli that could literally pour out so much poison into your body that it shuts down your kidney. And to tell you how smart they are now, that if the doctor starts treating the patient with an antibiotic, if they have this O157 or a mutation thereof, I think there's like 8 mutations now of this organism, it will literally pour so much poison, it'll shut down the kidney in retaliation. So now doctors are afraid to give their patients antibiotics, and they don't listen, because I told them, look, if you put in one of my, Trenev trio, it'll compete. It'll compete because it wants the host to live, because it likes that environment. And I said, if you don't give the patient something that it will compete, its survival would be very difficult and very painful, because some of these people struggle for a couple of weeks and they don't know if they're going to be gone or not. Because again, this organism is so smart and so prolific that literally just 10 colony forming units, which is so small you can't even imagine it, can cause all this damage and even death. So this is what we've done with the abuse of antibiotics. And this was, in the 1980s. So you can imagine how much more information these organisms, we have now dozens of microbes that are resistant to every known antibiotic.
And you think it's twofold, that the overuse of antibiotics has provided an opportunity for these bacteria to kind of come together, communicate.
Yeah, because it was extinction. Otherwise, it was extinction. And before, the classical microbiologists would never believe that antagonistic organisms would share data. Absolutely, they started sharing data because it was talking about survival of bacteria. And like I said, we assume because they're simple that they're ignorant. They're simple because they're so smart, because they can adopt in that simple form. It's very easy for them to adopt.
Wow. That is unbelievable. So
Mhm.
it's so simple what you're saying. Like to take these products every day, to have them on hand in case of an emergency situation.
Yep.
Where there is no hope, because I always go back to the kill versus fill mentality. We are very much a society that likes to kill things. Like if you have
Mhm.
cancer, we try to kill it. And if you have a bacteria, we try to kill it. And if you have an infection, we try to kill it. And yes, part of that is necessary to a point, but we have to get back to the fill mentality, that the body has to have enough to overcome and sustain and rebuild. And so it's even in like Lyme protocols. I'll get people come to me and have chronic Lyme. and they've been on antibiotics and antibiotics and antibiotics, and then a port, and then an IV. I mean, I'm just like, my goodness. And their labs look terrible. Their blood work, their nutrient deficiencies are terrible. Their skin is terrible. Their hair's falling
Mhm.
out. Their nails, that just everything's cracked. They have digestive issues. They have Lyme brain. And I'm like, didn't anybody take the time to fill your entire environment with nutrition and
Mhm.
probiotics and rebuild you at any point through this? It's
Yeah.
just kill, 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 kill. And even in the natural world, that helps. I mean, I think you were talking the other day, and I agree. People are parasite cleanse, candida cleanse crazy. You go
Yep.
see an alternative practitioner and they throw you on a cleanse. And I'm like, hold on a second. What have you even assessed if that person is able to detoxify naturally, if their liver's healthy, their kidney, their gut?
Mhm.
Like I always go with fill first. I'm gonna like fill the digestive system back up. I'm gonna fill the nutrient buckets back up. Then your body is able to get to a certain point. At that point, we may need to do some things. But I mean, I agree. It's too much kill, not enough fill.
Yeah, and the kill is creating this problem. Remember, that's why they start forming biofilms because biofilms are not affected by antibiotics. And by the way, the only thing that can affect a biofilm is a different group of bacteria that have a vested interest of getting rid of the biofilm because it's clogging up their territory. And other bacteria can figure out ways to tear apart the biofilm and get rid of it. And that's what we need to do because what we're not understanding, I think what's happened in our industry, without knowing, we've adopted the pharma model. We don't really look at the body holistically. And I said the most important thing, because we are more microbes than we are human cells. And there is a unity here. There is a unity and there's an optimal balance. That optimal balance is the secret to health and longevity. If that balance is disrupted by anything that we may do, either naturally or with a pharma drug, we are creating this problem. And by the way, the new research is showing yeast organisms and microbes in cancer cells. It's much more evident now because the early people, researchers who said, yeast is really causing the cancer growth, and yeast is found in every cancer cell. And I think we have to keep an open mind because that balance is what keeps us healthy. That balance of these proper microbes with the immune system is what keeps the body disease free. And also has an impact on our thoughts, on our perception of reality. It affects us because if the microbes are not there, they will the production of serotonin and dopamine will be lessened,
Right.
perhaps stopped. And of course, they also produce compounds that are precursors to the production of tryptophan and GABA and all the feel good chemicals that make us happy.
Mhm.
And so, it's a much more complex way of dealing with an individual. And I tell people before you start any expensive testing, get on a real probiotic protocol, fix the person's diet first for the first couple of weeks, have them do that cleanse, not, cleaning out everything and snapping everything off their intestinal wall and then not knowing what's going to go on there. Because I can warn everybody now, in microbiology, voids are not tolerated. So you take something off the intestinal wall, you have no idea what's going to occupy that space unless you're there with a backup to make sure that at least your colonies have a chance to filling that void.
These are
That
just
makes
things
sense.
that it makes perfect sense, but it's not something that's thought about, right? We're just so used to,
Mhm.
like you said, the pharma model. And I
Yep.
think in our industry, we just have to take a pause, take a breath, and kind of start again. People are not sick because they are. I'm going to say this, and I know someone's going to take it the wrong way, but people don't become sick because of the parasite. They become sick because the parasite disrupts biological
Mhm.
functions from depleting nutrients,
Mhm.
creating waste. I mean, you can live symbiotically with certain parasites and certain bacterias. I mean, what was it, H. pylori? I think I learned from you that people that have less than 10% of H. pylori in their gut
Mhm.
are more prone to be obese.
Yeah.
Now, isn't that interesting? Aren't we trying to get rid of H. pylori?
Now, there's certain bacteria that, if they're kept in check, that's the
Mhm.
word, kept in check, they're necessary. And that's part of, unfortunately, our diversity and our challenge. And
Yeah.
in fact, if you look at models of, how people traveled across the world, 11,000 years ago, you can find skeleton remains that have the H. pylori present and show us the migration patterns of whole civilizations. So again, it's our ignorance. We don't understand. And I tell people, if you have H. pylori out of control and you're infected, your whole family becomes infected. It's not just H. pylori, there's other organisms. They are very prolific and they're very aggressive. And if you have a stronger immune system, it's not going to manifest in you the same as it might another family member. And the other
Yeah.
family member that gets exposed to it can have a dramatic turn of health to become ill. Because remember that H. pylori and yeast will form alliances to attack the body. And
Wow.
the reason the pharma model of giving you 2 antibiotics and Pepto-Bismol to treat H. pylori in your stomach doesn't always work because the yeast will protect the H. pylori from the attack of antibiotics. That's another topic we should get into and talk about, and how it gives it the opportunity to burrow underneath the stomach lining and hide.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, we should bring you back for the H. pylori talk.
yeah, no, I mean, look, it's a problem because 20 years ago I was working with a doctor here out of the Tarzana Medical Center, Dr. Jay Udani, and he wanted to go on a trip to teach all the doctors. And I said, they'll listen to you, but they won't implement it because they just don't know how to deal with, natural things. It's not like take 2 pills and call me in 2 weeks. Doesn't work that way. They have to watch their diet. They have to be, make sure, because remember, the same therapy may not work the same way on two different individuals. Why? Because we all have our own individual composition of microbiota that is unique to ourselves as our fingerprint. Our perception of reality is also a cause for some bacteria not wanting to stay with us because we create an unfavorable environment and the bacteria are not going to stay to impress us. They stay because it's in their best interest. And for those of you who don't remember, 40% of your dry weight fecal matter is bacteria. So, there is a huge transport of food and bacteria through your body and expelling. So as you age, you become a less desirable environment for these bacteria. That's why it's so important for us to start supplementing as we age, because our bodies no longer become a desirable ground for them to stay. Now,
Right.
that one I haven't figured out why that happens. What happens as we age that we become a less desirable? So as we age, we need it more than ever because we want to be the optimal environment for them to stay and want us to maintain our health, our appearance, our skin, our hair, everything on our body. Because I said, who wants to live to be 100 and look like a dried up prune? Not me. So,
Me.
so, so the whole point of, staying around is to look your best and able to enjoy your life the best you can. And
Yeah.
all of us have problems, and it's not because we're bad people. It's because our poor bodies are subjected to foul air, foul food, pesticides in the ground, in the water. It's just incredible what our poor bodies are exposed to in the Western environment.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. I mean, we do everything but eat food, right? We think we're eating food, but we're not.
Um,
And then we're exposed to chemicals outside, golf courses, playing fields for sports. I mean, I was in the gym the other morning, in my gym, working out, getting healthier, and there was a guy walking through with a canister spraying something in the corners. I was like, "What are you doing?" It's like, I said, "I'm sorry. I'm trying to get healthier here, not die from chemical poisoning." And he was like, "I'm just trying to do my job, ma'am." I was like, "Well, I'm just trying to do my workout, sir." I was like, "So can you try to kill bugs later when Tracy's not here?" I just,
No, actually, let me just say this. I've warned people, even my own daughter. I said, if you're going to a gym, do not take a towel inside. Do not put your towel on any surface. I don't care what it is. Do not go in their showers. Do not go in their locker rooms. Because if you even get a scratch, they are the habitat of resistant Staph aureus. And if you get one of those infections, you better make it to the emergency room pronto because your whole foot could be gone.
Mhm. Yeah, I've had a client whose daughter had that. Her skin was peeling off.
Mm-hmm.
And it was during the time of the pandemic and the monkeypox. And they kept telling her she had monkeypox. And I was like, no, that's not monkeypox. And the mom knew as well. So finally got her to a place where they would listen. Uh,
Yeah.
but it's aggressive. Well, this has been extremely enlightening. I hope you'll come back and do more. And I know that we're going to be teaching some classes. Well, you are.
Yeah.
I'm going to be learning and hosting. You're going to be teaching. I'm going to be the student for once. It's going to be great. And so we will announce that and when those classes are coming up, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast. Also, make sure you subscribe to my newsletter and also Natasha's newsletter over at ProTrend. If
Mm-hmm.
you are a healthcare professional, you can get a wholesale account with ProTrend. You can start using these incredible products with your patients and clients, plus the education and the protocols that they provide you are hands down amazing. Make sure you go get an account today. It costs nothing to sign up and get your wholesale deal. If you're a consumer and you're interested in these products, I'll make sure that there's links available in the show notes so that you can get what you need. If you need any help, you can always reach out to my team or even to Natasha's team over at ProTrend. They are more than happy. They're so beautiful, the people there. They will help you out. So, Natasha, is there any parting words you want to leave with our listeners
Yeah.
today?
I want to say that, this field is so important. I think it's for the survival of humanity. Trust me, I'm 76. I shouldn't be working this many hours and weekends, but I stay because I see the industry I helped found is completely disoriented, ungoverned, and it's too important a time in our history, to be so scattered and not knowledgeable. It's a big challenge because we know that the health crisis in our country will destroy us very quickly. And the only thing, God forbid, that's worse is a nuclear war. And those are not my words.
Right.
So we need to really seriously tackle this issue and, stop following the pharma model and really get educated how we can help this body heal itself.
Yep. Fill versus kill. That's what we're going to walk out of here with today. We're going to fill
Right.
the health span of our body full of good Natasha Trenev backed and created probiotics out of her manufacturing plant so that we know it's awesome.
Right. And by the way, just the last word, I do want good competition. That's another reason I'm saying I can't possibly supply everybody, but my hope is that I raise the standard and that everybody is, up to par and we can reach them as many people as we can because God knows we need to.
No, that's great. That's a great word. I mean, you are so humble, but so brilliant at the same time. That's what I love about you. And I know that you care from deep in your heart. You really want people to be healthy. And it's just unfortunate that companies that have great marketing are putting out terrible products.
Yeah.
So, yes, you're going to pay a little bit more on the shipping for Natasha's products because she does keep them cold the whole time. There are just certain standards she's not willing to compromise on because when she does, it compromises your health. So just keep
Right.
that in mind when you're purchasing probiotics. Remember, you get what you pay for. You get what people are willing to spend on the creation of the product for your health. And it matters. It really
Yeah.
does. I truly appreciate you sticking to your principles. Don't change. Make sure you bring the standard up rather than you cowering down to the low standards
No,
that are out there.
I won't. Then people have come to me with open checkbooks. How much? And I said, no, no amount of money because I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. knowing that I did something so wrong.
Yeah, well, you've built an incredible product, an incredible industry. You've built this industry out. Now we just have to get everybody back up so that they are putting out great products. Because you're right, you can't do it all yourself. So I hear if brands hear this, please reach out to me or to Natasha. I'll get you connected to her if you want to have a conversation about improving your product, because I think it would be amazing. So.
Of course, and I'd love to do more education because we're going to be facing tremendous challenges, and we really need to understand bacteria and their objective and how we can help ourselves.
Well, we're going to start. We're going to put some classes out on that and just getting people back in the right mindset and understanding so they can start at home taking care of themselves. If we can't reach the powers that be, we'll reach the moms and dads that can really do it from the ground roots up. So
Yeah.
thank you, Natasha,
Thank
aka
you.
Mother of Probiotics, for being here today. And everybody, thanks for listening. Remember to subscribe to this podcast. Make sure you share it with somebody, especially those mamas that are having babies. If you have people that have children on the spectrum, you've heard so many things in this podcast today. Please share it. Please give it to somebody who can benefit from knowing this information. Make sure you go to my Facebook page, give it a like, and go check out ProTrend. Especially if you're a practitioner, get your wholesale account and make sure you order your probiotics so that your family's healthy. Everybody have a great day and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracey. Thank you for this.